Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and thank you for being here. Today we're doing kind of a long overdue video on my experience working with a personal functional nutritional and hormone coach. I've been working with her really diligently one-on-one since March or April. But then I've worked with her in other capacities as far as just having a one-off meeting since October of last year, and I've been friends with her for a couple years now. So I just kind of wanted to give my experience on that and kind of give inside info on what it's been like. So we'll go back to the beginning. If you've been here a while, you may or may not know that I came off of hormonal birth control last June of 2022. And I felt really good mentally, but my body very quickly had a lot of changes that I had never experienced happen before. I gained weight very rapidly. I didn't really feel that great. I had really bad period pains and just things that I wasn't used to. And so after some lab testing and some doctor's visits, I found out that I had elevated testosterone, which is a really good indicator of PCOS, and I wasn't ovulating, which is another indicator of PCOS. And so basically I got diagnosed with PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I never had experienced symptoms before because the hormonal birth control that I was on suppressed those symptoms for nearly 10 years. So having this new diagnosis kind of was a lot of information to take in all at once, and I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know what steps that I needed to take in order to feel good again. And to be honest, part of that for me was I knew that I did need to lose weight, not because I wanted to be thinner, but because it wasn't really it didn't feel like it was true weight that I had gained. It just felt like my whole entire body was swollen and inflamed and just not good. So after reading some books and doing a little bit of research, which I did do a video on as well, I'll link that up here, I kind of determined I needed a professional. I needed someone who had way more knowledge than me and who could hold my hand a little bit and make it so that I didn't have to think so much about it, because I have a lot on my mind already, and I just couldn't take on the mental capacity of having to figure this out on my own. So I reached out to Elena and I had a one-on-one meeting with her back in October. And that's where she looked at my labs that I had already gotten done. And we determined that I most likely was not insulin resistant, which is a thing people commonly believe about PCOS, is that all women with PCOS are insulin resistant. And that's not the case, not all the time. And I was one of the few people that is not insulin resistant. So we determined that, and then she put me on an elimination diet, not to lose weight or anything, but to just kind of see, get that biofeedback of what makes me feel good versus what doesn't make me feel good. And it was a long process. So it started in October with me eliminating nightshades, which is eggplant, blueberries, things like that, eliminating that for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks later eliminate another thing, and then another thing, and another thing. And it was a whole process that actually lasted 6 months of eliminating things, and then at that 6-month mark slowly reintegrating them to see what affects me and what makes me feel bad. And through that process, I figured out that tomatoes really make me feel not great, and kind of gives me a sour stomach. And unfortunately, gluten and dairy are two kind of triggers for my personal PCOS symptoms and my personal body. And so those are things that I've worked on continually to try to keep eliminated, just to make me feel better, because I notice when I do have dairy or I do have gluten, the next day my stomach is really upset, my indigestion is really bad, my body feels swollen and bad. And so it's just for the best that I try to keep those things eliminated. Now, of course, like, because I have a history of restricting my food and my diet a lot, it is kind of hard for me to have those things completely out of the picture. But Elena has made it very clear to me, and like I've made it clear to myself too, it's not like I have to have it cut out of my life forever. Like I know what happens to me when I eat dairy and when I eat gluten. So it's kind of like a cost benefit analysis of like, okay, is this moment worth it to have this thing? And sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. That's kind of the mindset that I have with that now. Back in March, I believe, is when I first started working with Elena in a one-on-one coaching capacity, because I had reached the point where I had done all that I felt like I could do on my own, and I just needed extra support. Like, I just needed accountability, and I needed a person whose role was to just support me and help me out. And I think I really underestimated how much of a big impact that would have on me and on my progress. So first thing we did is we ordered a Dutch lab, which is basically it's a dried urine analysis test, testing your sex hormones and your adrenal hormones. And so that was one of the first things we did. And that came back, and we were able to make some evaluations off of that, and Elena made some more recommendations for additional supplements that I can take to help regulate my testosterone and my adrenal glands, just kind of help me out a little bit. And that has been really, really helpful. She also has given me like a workout plan, starting only with 2 days a week, and now we're up to 3 days a week, and just making it really doable and easy for me. And I talk to her throughout the week whenever I have questions, which has been really helpful. She's given me like meal plan ideas, but past that, like, I'm pretty independent on figuring out like what I eat. I don't feel restricted at all. And since I started working with her in March, I've lost 12 pounds. And so much of that, I feel like, was just inflammation, because I feel so much better. The biggest victory to me is in October, when I first came to Elena, I wasn't wearing my wedding rings, and I hadn't been able to wear my wedding rings for a while because my body was so swollen. I literally just could not get them on. And if I could get them on, I could not get them off. And so the biggest victory to me is like, now I'm able to wear my wedding ring again, and it like spins around my finger, and I'm able to wear it and take it off easily, put it on easily. And that's like the best feeling, because I mean, it feels so nice. So anyway, overall experience with her so far has been really amazing and fantastic. And a lot of like the ideas and questions that I have for her, I'm able to ask, and she answers right away. And it's so helpful. I never once feel restricted. I like have such great communication with her. I truly know that she's like my cheerleader and my supporter in this. And the biggest thing for me is that she is against diet culture just as much as I am. Like, she knows that there are so many other reasons for people to go into coaching and go into nutrition and workouts that don't have anything to do with losing weight. And that is so big for me. It was really important for me that if I was going to work with someone on this process, I found someone who had the same vision as I did, aligned in my beliefs of like, I'm not doing this to change my body per se. I'm doing it because I need to feel better, and I want to understand my body, and I want to understand my cycle. She's been helping me really help understand my cycle as well. Like, literally just yesterday I texted her and I was like, I this week have been having the hardest time like waking up and feeling rested no matter how much sleep I get. And she's like, oh, well, what phase of your cycle are you in? And I said, probably, I looked up my Natural Cycles app, and I was like, possibly follicular, but it's waiting to confirm ovulation. So if ovulation happened, then I'm in my luteal phase now. And she's like, that probably explains a lot why. And I texted her yesterday after my workout, and I was just like, I did my workout, but I cut it short. I skipped 2 exercises. Like, I very half-assed it. And she was like, honestly, that's fine. She was like, 90% of the time, your workouts are just going to be like, I did it. And that's what nobody really talks about on social media or anywhere, is that like most of your workouts are just going to be like, okay, I did it. That's whatever. It's not every single workout is going to be some like victorious, huge moment. A lot of them are going to feel like this is all that I could muster and this is what I was able to do, and that's normal and that's fine. So that felt really good to hear. I'm just really, really happy and excited that I decided to work with Elena on this, because I don't think I'd be able to have as good of a handle on my PCOS symptoms as I do if it wasn't for her. And like, I truly, truly mean that, because I don't think I would have devoted the time and the research it takes for me to have gotten this done. And I don't think I would have gotten like the hormone tests if it wasn't for her either, because that's not something I would have been able to seek out on my own. And to be honest, if I had sought it out on my own and gotten the results, I would have been like, great, what the F does all of this mean? And she really helped contextualize that. So it has been a really, really great experience. And I definitely had the stigma that like anybody who works with a coach is just, conceited and wants to lose weight and look good. I'll be honest, like that is fully the misconceived and wrong notion that I had. But since working with Elena, I realized it really is just about, it's kind of the ultimate form of self-care, is to have the privilege of having someone support you solely to help you feel better and to help you feel good and confident again. And it's really, really helped me. And I'm really, really excited that she agreed to do a video with me today and talk with you about everything. I have a lot of questions, both that I came up with myself and that my audience helped come up with too over on my Instagram page. So if you're not following me on Instagram, you can go do that right now. That's where I post a lot of stories related to YouTube videos and questions, ask me anything, things like that. But I'm really excited that she agreed to meet with me today, film this video with me, so we can answer these questions, give you some guidance as well, and kind of help destigmatize a lot of things that surround hormones and functional nutrition and coaching and all of that good stuff. One more thing. I do have a special discount code link down below in the description box. If you are interested in working with Elena at any point now or in the future, it does give you a special little discount, just because Elena and I have such a close relationship, and this was something we both wanted to make sure that we offered to anybody who wants some extra help and support. So if you're interested in that at any point in time, you can go ahead and click that down below in the link in the bio. Without further ado, here is Elena and I talking about a lot of questions, and make sure you go and give her a follow on Instagram as well. She posts a lot of good free content and like free helpful tips and everything, and she's just a gem to follow. So go give her a follow, watch this video, drop any questions you have down below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Here we have Elena with us today.
Hey, yo. Oh, hold on. I look almost topless. I didn't catch that. Okay, now I look less topless.
Perfect.
Sorry. If you want to redo the intro, you can.
No, you're good. This is great. First of all, the first thing I want to address, which I think is oftentimes like an elephant in the room, is the fact that like you're not a BeachBody coach. Like you're not
a fake fitness coach.
Exactly. Like you're not some fake fitness coach online. Like there's a million of nowadays. Like you're legit.
Yeah. And it's very difficult because there's nothing in the industry that's regulated. Like there's literally nothing that's regulated. And what's honestly shocking is I actually get very few people who ask me to clarify my qualifications for them before they sign up to work with me.
Really?
And I'm like, you have a lot of trust in people on the internet. I'm just saying, because most of my clients are online. Like I live in Phoenix, you live in Colorado. Like, so, Arizona, Colorado, it's just like, okay, but we obviously had sort of an established relationship prior to us working together. But I don't like post my certifications online. And, you know, I work in another coaching container, helping other coaches kind of help their businesses off the ground as well. And they post like CPT, NASM level, blah, blah, blah in their bio. And I'm like, nobody cares. Literally nobody cares. Use that real estate for something different from a marketing perspective. But people almost never ask me this question. And it's funny because I've invested close to $20,000 in my coaching certifications over the last 3 years.
That's wild.
It's wild. And I feel like I've gotten like a whole nother like graduate degree almost in a lot of this stuff. Because of everything that I've invested in. And that's just certifications and courses. That's not even like mentorships with other coaches to help me learn to be a better coach and hone my craft and make sure that my business can actually function, you know, if I take a day off or something like that. You know what I mean? But I started off very simply by getting my, you know, just basic certification, you know, did my ISSA personal training, nutrition certification, because you just got to get your foot in the door. You got to get something. And then from there, I went on to do a hormone specialist certification after that. And then and that was through Nutrition Coaching Institute. And then in addition to that, I also took, you know, a gut health master class through them. And I took like another level 1, was it a level 2? I can't remember, nutrition course. And at that point, it's just like, it's all just sort of like reestablishing the basics, you know, because the basics really do work. Like, you know, and we'll get into that, but you know, as my client, like I'm not doing anything weird.
No. And I feel like that's the thing that nobody wants
here.
Yeah. And nobody wants to talk about that on social media. Everybody wants like the weird thing or like the crazy thing. And it's like, that's not what's going to work most of the time.
The weird shit doesn't work the way that you think it is. And then from there, I also got a pre and postpartum certification because I coach a lot of women. I coach primarily women, although I do have, you know, every now and then I get a gentleman who's interested in like, you know, helping get more support with his hormones and stuff like that, which I can definitely support men too. But I primarily work with women. It just defaulted to that somehow. And you know, working with individuals who are pregnant and postpartum, it's like, if you're going to work with a female population in the fitness industry, I almost felt like I needed to get that. Like, I felt like I had a responsibility to have this baseline information, because I have clients where I help them get off birth control. We recovered their hormones. They got pregnant and they can stay with me. They don't have to like try to figure out, what do I do? What do I do when this happens? I've already got that information and those resources ready to go for them as soon as that little line turns pink. So that's always a blessing too, because I do have clients that are, you know, pre and postpartum, or they're actively trying to conceive. And that does come into play. One of my clients that she's so sweet. She's just like, she goes, I'm pregnant. She goes, you got me pregnant. And I'm just like, I kind of did. And she's due with her little boy, in October. And I'm so excited. Yeah, I'm so excited for her. I cannot wait.
I love that.
It's such a good feeling. And then from there, again, I just continue to do master classes and courses and things like that. I've taken, you know, a lot of non-certification, like master classes is what they call them. It's just like a topic specific on like endometriosis, dealing with diabetes, you know, working with corrective exercise, all of those kinds of things. They're just part of the learning experience. I'm always taking a class or reading a book, or if I'm not in a certification course, I'm always learning. And then from there, I did functional nutrition and metabolic specialization, which is FNMS. So I am certified to work in functional nutrition and metabolic specialization. I have access to practitioner level, you know, medical provider level, pharmaceutical level supplementations for a lot of my clients, which you take some of those. You know, they're very high quality, and they really do make an impact, as you are experiencing for yourself, when we start to fill in the gaps for basic health needs. And again, she's not taking anything weird, you guys. No, like I think the first thing I told her to take, I was like, take a damn multivitamin and a vitamin D, like please, for the love of God, get a fish oil. And she's just like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, what are these? Basic health, friend. And then I also am in another functional nutrition course right now too, with another coach, which is interesting because the first functional nutrition course that I took was very like, what the fitness industry refers to as gen pop. So like non-athletes, just like regular everyday people. And this fitness course is more, geared towards, like physique and performance athletes. So it's interesting to see the two sides of functional nutrition as applied to just like regular everyday people out on the street. And then as well as like intermediate to advanced lifters and performance enthusiasts. So it's really interesting to see both sides of that, world and how those things get applied, how much of it is similar, but also how much of it is also different because you're handling nutrition with a more advanced fitnesser or gym goer. Maybe they do CrossFit, maybe they're into Olympic lifting, maybe they're into bodybuilding. That gets handled so much differently than somebody who's just wanting to not feel like shit on a daily basis.
Yeah.
That's sort of the formal education that I went through to go through all of that. So
yeah. And I know with me, when I first started following you a couple of years ago, that was one of the things that drew me to you, was that you were talking specifically about like women and hormones. And I know you touched on it briefly already about like how a lot of your clients are coming off of birth control. And so I want to also ask about what post-birth control syndrome is, because that's something that I made the mistake with. And I'm sure a ton of other women do the same thing, where they're just like, oh, whatever, I'll just come off the pill. It's like no big deal. And it's like, actually, it's a big deal.
Am I the asshole if I say I told you so?
No, absolutely not.
But you're working with me now, and we managed to like undo some of the damage that got done inadvertently, right? And so, and to be completely fair, I went through this myself. Like I had to learn the hard way personally too. So like, I get it. You want to get off birth control because, the way that it alters our brain chemistry and the way that it alters our microbiome, the way that it alters our ability to hold on to lean tissue and manage body fat, and also the way that it can impact our anxiety and our depression is so huge. Like I felt like a completely different person when I was on birth control, and then I didn't feel like myself after so many years. I was like, who am I? And it's funny because there's actually like even been anecdotal stories of women coming off birth control and then they are no longer attracted to their partners. And they like their partners because their brain chemistry has been completely altered while they were on the pill. They get off the pill and they're like, wow, what I thought I want was not what I wanted. And you smell weird now. So no.
I've read that too. It like changes the way you like perceive the pheromones and everything. And I'm just like, it's so crazy. It's so wild. It's something I didn't know about at 17 when I got on it.
No, nobody tells you. So real quick recap of what post-birth control syndrome is, because I could literally talk about it. I have a whole podcast episode on it. It's essentially hormonal birth control is synthetic hormones. Okay. It's synthetic estrogen, it's synthetic progesterone. And this comes in multiple forms. There's multiple forms of it, depending on what you're taking. It's either maybe one or the other, or a combination of something. But essentially what they do is they shut down the pathway between your ovaries and your brain, so you no longer ovulate. Okay. Now, if you are on an IUD, you technically do still ovulate, but you're not going to have enough like progesterone in your system usually at that point, enough like regular progesterone, endogenous, the stuff that you produce on your own, in order for there to be enough of a uterine lining for that pregnancy to be viable, because progesterone levels need to be at a certain point. That's what impacts the uterine lining. And that's what will make a pregnancy more or less viable, especially within the first, like 8 to 12 weeks. So progesterone levels are super important to conception, as well as a healthy first trimester. I digress. Anyway, what happens is when you withdraw those synthetic hormones from your body suddenly, after having been on it for probably at this point years, sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's 3 years, sometimes it's 10 plus. I was a 10 pluser. Good, yeah, yay for me. I think you were too, close to, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is your pathways have been shut down, so your body is no longer producing regular estradiol, progesterone, testosterone on its own at a rate that would make you essentially a healthy individual from a reproductive standpoint. You've now pulled this other synthetic hormones, and now your body is like, we ain't got nothing to work with. And this can cause a whole slew of issues. This can cause, sometimes people feel amazing when they come off birth control, and then they get hormonal acne, and it's horrible. Sometimes they feel even more anxious and more depressed once they pull the plug on those synthetic hormones, and they gain weight out of nowhere, they start dealing with a lot of inflammation. Because what's happened too is while you're on this synthetic hormone, your adrenal system are also trying to help compensate for the fact that you've put a block in the system. It's wild. Birth control is the only actual FDA approved medication that is not meant to fix something. It's literally meant to break a system within your body. And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
That's wild when you put it like that.
Yeah, it's literally the only FDA approved drug that's meant to not to shut something down in your body, like break it essentially. And it can also manifest again in like on post-birth control onset PCOS, which is what you experienced, which was absolutely wild for you. You were just like, what is happening with my body? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I thought this was going to solve all my problems. And it did to a degree, but it also like unearthed some new things. And then also people tend to have a lot of digestive issues that sort of go unresolved because maybe they've had those digestive issues while they're on the birth control or after they come off, because it changes your microbiome, which is the array of bacteria that's within your digestive system. When they come off of that birth control, now their microbiome has had something that has now disrupted it and it goes off the walls. And so there's multiple things that post-birth control syndrome can look like, but essentially it's a set of symptoms that somebody might experience within that first month to 6 months coming off of birth control that are undesirable.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I faced, which like I had only heard stories of people coming off of birth control and they're like, oh, I feel amazing. I feel great. And like mentally, I felt good for the first little bit, but then like all the changes happened to my body that I wasn't expecting. And, you know, part of me too was like the selfish part of me was like, oh, people say they always lose weight when they come off of birth control. Like maybe that'll happen to me. And the opposite happened.
Yeah. It didn't happen right away though, right? It can happen within 4 to 6 months, even of coming off of birth control. Things kind of, because when we start manifesting physical symptoms of hormone imbalance, it's been brewing under the hood for several months at that point, maybe years. So by the time you're feeling it, there's already been something wrong.
Yeah.
Your body's just been compensating and it is no longer compensating. It's tired. It quit. It's done. It's like, bitch, you deal with it.
Yeah. Because I came off the pill in June, and I think in like September-ish was when I really started feeling it. And then I reached out to you initially in October and was like, hi, I need help.
Yeah. And I think that's when we did our first like consult together where we like got your labs together and we put you sort of like on like an initial like, hey, let's do these things. And you saw some initial progress, but you knew you needed more. And then that's when, you know, we decided to work together privately. And so, but it got you, you know, at least got you on the ball rolling with some things, especially your digestion. You were like, wow.
Yes. Yeah. That has been wild and helpful. Going back, like if I had done it properly, what would have been the right way to come off of hormonal birth control?
So a lot of medical doctors will disagree with me on some of these things, and that's totally okay. Medical professionals, we have to recognize that their role is to treat something that's wrong. It's usually not to be preventative, and that's not their fault. That's the fault of the system, and that's just how they're trained. So I'm a person that likes to get your blood work right when you come off birth control or even before. So when I take somebody off of birth control, I actually have like an 8 to 12 week process that I take them through prior to them even taking the IUD out or going off the pill or stopping the pill or getting whatever implant removed. And we go through a process where we really prime the body to reestablish these natural rhythms within the body, to go through the follicular, ovulatory, luteal, and menstrual phase and support with nutrients. And so we essentially treat the body as if it has a natural cycle, and we fuel with specific nutrients utilizing food over the course of 2 months. We also introduce specific supplementation. Now, generally, this will include like a multivitamin, vitamin D, fish oil, the ones that I always say people have. But depending on what that specific person is dealing with, sometimes we introduce DIM, sometimes we introduce magnesium, sometimes we introduce chasteberry, which helps reestablish that connection between the ovaries and the brain. And so depending on the individual, we'll implement different nutrition strategies and a supplement protocol for a minimum of 8 weeks prior to them coming off the pill. So that way, by the time they're coming off the pill, they're already helping fill in the gaps, because birth control causes severe nutrient deficiencies. Again, people don't realize this. It's severe nutrient deficiencies in zinc, magnesium, iron, vitamin D, B vitamins, all get zapped from the body when you're on this hormonal birth control. And if you're not replenishing those nutrients, then you're going to have a real hard time coming off of them. And so I get people on at least that. If you can get like a solid multivitamin, and I can give you some links that you can share that are the same exact ones that I tell, you guys to take, my clients to take, the same ones I use. I'll share those because most everyone should be able to take those without any, issues, because it's going to cover the bases. Specifically, the one I usually recommend is that like Thorn 2 a day. If you've looked at the label, you'll see that a lot of the daily serving amounts is like 1,000 times what the daily serving is on some of those. Have you ever looked at that?
Yeah.
And it's because you're only absorbing 10% of that.
Wow.
You only absorb about 10% of a multivitamin.
Huh.
Which is why you have to get one that's dosed well.
I never knew that.
That's why I'm really specific with the recommendations that I make. So, and the quality of the supplements, because you're only absorbing so much of that. And that's assuming that you have a healthy digestive system. If you're having digestive issues, you're going to be absorbing less than that. So we fill in those gaps. We come off of that. We maintain that supplement and nutrient protocol for an additional 4 to 8 weeks. And every single person that I've taken off of birth control utilizing this structure has gotten it back within 5 weeks. And then they have a regular cycle after that.
Wow, that's awesome.
Unless they're at an age where they're going to be perimenopausal and they're not going to regain their cycle because they're maybe in their mid 40s to, late 40s, early 50s. They might not regain their cycle at that point, and that's totally fine. But even recently, I had another client, and she's 42. She's turning 43 in the next year, and she just got her cycle back after we went through a similar process, and she got it back. And she's like, "Oh my God, I feel amazing. My skin's cleared up. My digestion has recovered." She's like, she goes, "I feel like a whole new person now."
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of people underestimate, is like, you don't realize the fog that you're in until you're out from under it.
Yeah. It's like the whole saying of like, you don't realize how shitty you feel until you realize how good you can feel.
Right. Exactly. And from the food perspective, one of the big things that I have people feed into their diet during this whole protocol is we do a lot of green vegetables, like 400 to 500 grams of green veggies a day, which sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. And a lot of fiber rich, healthy, fatty foods. We got avocados, we got blueberries, we have wild caught salmon, we've got red meat in the mix, right? We're getting a lot of these nutrients in because, again, we're trying to fill in the gaps that the birth control zapped from us. We're trying to make everything, prime our bodies to be able to reset these systems in a way so that it gets back on track. So it's funny because then people go, okay, we go 8 weeks, and then they come off, and then we wait another month, and they're like, "Oh man, this first period, man, it's a win, but like, man, this really sucks." And I'm just like, I know, congratulations.
Yeah. I relate to that. Speaking of foods and everything, are there certain like foods that we know we should eat and should avoid for like hormone health and PCOS, or is it kind of just like dependent on the person?
That's a great question. Yes and yes. So yes, there are certain things, and yes, it is dependent on the person. So some general concepts that I want to kind of debunk is, gluten and dairy, obviously. But there's reasons for this. There's literally data shown, and I've read the medical studies and I've done the research, because again, if I'm not in a certification, I'm like reading and taking notes and things like that, that there are proteins within dairy that can cause inflammation with individuals with PCOS. And dairy in and of itself is one of those things where people with just general hormone imbalance or gut issues kind of can tend to avoid, and then they can eventually reintroduce it. But when we reintroduce it, we want to reintroduce it typically as a higher quality dairy. So you are going to go for like a more organic or fermented option in this situation. Or maybe you can have it if it's an ingredient in something, like if it's an ingredient in a baked good of some kind, right? Versus like straight up milk. You know what I mean? Or like cheese, things like that. Or you can tolerate it to a threshold. So whenever I do an elimination diet, and you and I kind of experience this, I do a 2-step reintroduction, which is not common. A lot of people don't do this, but I know that there's thresholds to what people can tolerate. And so some people might be able to tolerate the first reintroduction, but the second reintroduction doesn't go well. And it's like, okay, cool. We know what your threshold for X amount, this food is, it's this amount. It's this amount of food that you can tolerate. So if you do have it, maybe not do it every day, but the days that you do have it, keep it under this amount so you know what you're going to be able to respond well to. And then as far as gluten goes, gluten is one that actually a lot of people, I end up removing it from their food choices, right? From their daily food intake, because there's a couple of reasons. One, if people have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, you usually need to remove it for several years. You may or may not be able to reintroduce it, because with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, there's actually this thing called molecular mimicry, where the body recognizes a specific protein or specific enzyme within gluten is so molecularly similar to the thyroid gland tissue that it attacks the thyroid gland when you eat gluten. It's a great time. Love it. I have Hashimoto's, so I've lived this. It's really not a great time. I was lying. I was being very sarcastic. Hopefully you caught that, but it's wild.
That is wild.
Now, I'm at the point where I'm in remission and I can tolerate gluten to a threshold and a quality. So if I go get a donut from Dunkin' versus eating like a fresh baked bread from a local bakery, those are two different experiences.
Yeah.
Which is wild. Again, super weird, but I don't make the rules. I just follow them. And then as far as digestive issues, here's the thing: is a lot of people say hormones, but they don't say guts. And it's like the two really go hand in hand, because a lot of the root issues of hormone imbalance can sometimes be rooted back into digestive issues. I talked to somebody and they talked to me, oh, my period is this, my period is that. My doctor said this about my thyroid. I'm like, cool, how's your digestion? And they're like, oh, it's awful. I'm like, why didn't you lead with that?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. And I have like a whole questionnaire that I make people take when, I do now, at least I've got a system of things that I like check. And it's like, okay, are we dealing with leaky gut syndromes? Do you have dysbiosis, which is bacterial imbalance? Do you have, maybe SIBO, which is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth? Like, what are you showing biofeedback for? And specifically with leaky gut is in high levels of intestinal permeability. So you have this lining of the gut and it's got these junctions. Well, there's again, there's an enzyme within gluten that causes those junctions to stretch out. So you don't have to have celiac to have an issue with gluten. Now, if you recover your intestinal lining, you can eventually, again, reintroduce gluten, but you cannot be an asshole to your body anymore.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to end up in the same damn place that you were at before. And that's, again, the other thing. And you and I have had this conversation of what really balance is, because it's not what people think it is.
No.
It's actually a much different perspective. And it requires a little bit more reflection and usually a little bit more restraint in the changes that you make within your life in order to maintain your health. Otherwise, you end up right back where you were. So with, dairy and gluten, those are two big ones. Nightshades is another one. And you and I discovered this. Nightshades are things like tomatoes, peppers, cayenne pepper, chili pepper seasonings like that. Because they have like an alkaline in them that can cause a lot of inflammation when you have high levels of intestinal permeability. And a lot of times just reducing or removing nightshades from your diet can decrease a lot of pain and discomfort in your digestive system. It can reduce a lot of stomach, issues with indigestion, with bloating, that like cramping that you get with bloating. And that was something that you kind of discovered initially. That was one of the first things that I had you do was I was like, take out nightshades. And you did. You were like, oh my God, I feel so much better.
Yeah, I really discovered it with tomatoes and onions as well. And are onions a nightshade?
Onions are not a nightshade, but they are a high FODMAP food.
Yeah, so those two things, and garlic as well. Anytime
garlic is
I
also
had
a FODMAP.
Yeah, anytime I had anything with that, I just felt so bloated. And it was the kind of thing where like 48 hours later, I could still like taste it in my mouth and like everywhere, where I was just like, I feel gross.
Yeah. And FODMAPs are like a whole other conversation because they're not bad. But FODMAPs are highly fermentable. It's like fermentable, blah, 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 blah. There's a million words in it, but essentially it's something that feeds the bacteria within your digestive system at a very quick rate. They're very, very digestible for that bacteria. And if you have any kind of bacterial imbalance, you're going to continue to feed that, opportunistic bacteria, or even if you have too much commensal bacteria, which is the good stuff, that can happen. You can have too much of the good stuff. You get too much of the commensal stuff. You eat too many high FODMAPs. Well, you're still going to be feeling like shit. So sometimes you have to, do a low FODMAP diet, but you can't live in a low FODMAP, because then if you stay in a low FODMAP diet, you're going to swing too far the other way. You got to eventually refeed and rebalance the microbiome by reintroducing FODMAPs. Like again, doing sort of like a slow, steady reintroduction. This is why I always say, like, if somebody's going to go through an elimination diet, you really want to see if you can like work with somebody to do this, because there's so many variables to an elimination diet and a successful reintroduction. And you do one thing wrong, you screw the whole thing up, and you got to do it again.
Yeah. And I think too, is having it be like a really long time, like what we did. Like ours, I think it took me like 6 months or more to really like go through the whole thing. And I think many people hear elimination diet, and first of all, they think of like, oh, you're doing that for like weight loss or whatever. Right. And then two, they're like, oh, it's like a 12-week thing. And it's like, no, it's a commitment.
It is. And what a lot of people don't recognize too, and I kind of tell, and it's dependent on the person. There are some individuals who are going to have to maintain eliminations for 6 to 8 months or longer.
Yeah.
If you've got autoimmune disease, or you've got severe gut issues, you've got a lot of things happening, you get to the point where you eliminate, you get your symptoms under control, and you have to maintain that for 6 to 8 months at a minimum before you begin reintroducing things again, because your body now needs that time to heal. If you throw fuel back onto those burning embers, it's going to respark that fire, and people bring things back in way too fast. And it's like, people are like, wow, you really have clients that have been with you for like 2 years longer. I'm like, yes, because this shit takes time.
Yeah. And I think that was like the first, I think, realization for me, where I was like, okay, this isn't going to be like an easy fix. This is going to be a long haul mission.
Oh yeah. I always tell people, I'm like, this is not the 90-day transformation.
No,
it's not.
Absolutely not. Speaking of it being kind of like a long haul journey, is like, when you're first starting out in the journey to regulate your hormones, or I'm speaking specifically for hormones here, just because I feel like that's what I have the most relatability with, is like, what's the best first step to take?
Get blood work. But you want to get decent blood work. A lot of doctors won't do like an actual full hormone panel. Like if they're looking at your thyroid, they need to look at 4 different things at a minimum, but they might only look at 1 or 2. You need to not just look at your thyroid. You need to look at your sex hormones. You need to get a cortisol test. You need to see where your cholesterol is. So you have to look at your adrenals, which is your cortisol, your DHEAS, your thyroid, which is going to be a TSH. And I'll give Hannah a list of things that she can share with people, because nobody's going to remember all of this. You want to check your full thyroid, your TSH, your free T4, your free T3, your reverse T3, at least those 4. Ideally, if you could get a thyroid antibody at least once, just to make sure you don't have any kind of autoimmune disease, that's always a good thing to check. Or thyroid inflammation, because elevated antibodies aren't always a sign of autoimmune disease. Sometimes it's just inflammation that's leading in that direction. You want to check all your sex hormones, your estradiol, your progesterone, your testosterone, your free testosterone, and you want to check it on the right day of your period. You want to go during day 19 to 21, so you can see where that peak between estrogen and progesterone is. Even if you're on birth control, some people are like, well, won't hormonal birth control like wreck my hormone labs? And it's like, no, not necessarily, because I have individuals who are still on hormonal birth control because they've decided that that is the choice that is the best for them. And it's like, cool, let's roll with that. We can still improve their progesterone levels even when they're on hormonal birth control. It's a little trickier sometimes, but it's doable, and they feel better. You want to double check your cholesterol, get all your cholesterol levels. You want to get your insulin. You want to get your fasted glucose. So this should be a fasted lab in the morning. You want to get your fasted glucose. You want to get your A1C. And then you want to just get your basic like CBC, CMP, like metabolic panel, check your, livers and your, all the different things that are signifiers of like liver health and kidney health and stuff like that. A CRP, which is going to be cardiac reactive protein, which is going to be indicative of cardiac health as well as systemic inflammation. So that's like a full panel. I think I covered everything.
Yeah. But again, that sounds about right.
I'll give you a list. But now here's the thing is, if you can't access that on your own, you can access something, go to lifeextension.com and get it's called I hate that they call it a weight loss comprehensive hormone hormone panel. But it covers the majority of those things. It doesn't cover all of them, but it covers a majority of those things. And it's about $200. And then if you really, really want to go deep, do what Hannah did and do a consultation with me, because I include the labs on those. And I do now.
Oh, and that lab was so helpful too. And it's something that like
helpful.
I wouldn't have done on my own. And even if I did do it on my own, I wouldn't have known what the heck anything meant. Yeah.
Right.
I've been like, okay, cool.
Right. And it, like, is a one-off consultation going to like solve all your problems? Probably not. But is it going to at least give you some answers, validate what you're feeling and experiencing, and give you a starting point? Yes.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole point of it.
Exactly. But one thing I really wanted to kind of delve into, and it might be too long for us to answer here, but it's something that's been heavy on my brain a lot lately, is like how to remedy of like the fact of like wanting to lose weight while still wanting to be like body neutral and body positive. Yeah. Because that's like what I build my whole platform on. Correct. And then I have this part inside of me where I'm like, I do want to lose weight. I don't have like a number. I don't have a goal or anything. I just like want to feel good. And it's hard to remedy those two things.
The first thing I always tell people is it's not anybody's business to tell you how you feel about the body that you're in. You can be grateful for what your body does for you and for where it's gotten you and for what it permits you to do, while still not feeling at home in your own skin. And sometimes there's no amount of affirmations and manifestations and mirror work that you can do that's going to make you feel good about what you see in the mirror. That doesn't mean that you're treating yourself like an asshole, right? So when you're approaching weight loss, it's always a balance of, I'm not going to beat myself into the ground to try to achieve a specific goal, but you have an idea in your mind, and you'll know when you get there of what does really feeling at home in my skin feel like, and what does it look like? And it's okay to want to pursue those goals. The difference is that you're not holding yourself to somebody else's standard. You're holding yourself to your own. Because that's the whole thing behind diet culture, right? Is that there's one standard and one thing and one way to get there, and that's the appropriate way. And it changes from year to year. Like, what is the acceptable physique? What is the acceptable strategy to get there? And what you do for your body has nothing to do with what society says. Because even I'll tell you guys too, I'm currently pursuing a calorie deficit. Would somebody look at me and go that you have weight to lose? They'd probably be like, you're fine. Why are you trying to lose weight? Well, the reality is that I had a stretch of time where I was dealing with a lot of high stress situations, and I gained like 15 pounds. And I just never lost it again. And I don't feel comfortable in my clothes. I don't always feel comfortable in a swimsuit. And because I know that weight gain came out of a place of imbalance and not treating myself well, it's like, I don't want to be in this skin anymore. I want to be in a body that I've treated well, that I've gotten to a point where, is it going to be 15 pounds weight loss that's going to be my happy place? I have no idea, because my body composition is probably different than it was when I gained the weight. I have more muscle now. So, but I'll know what that feels like. But at the same time, I'm not hiding my body. I'm not berating myself. I'm not looking in the mirror and going, why are you such a fat slob? Like, those narratives, because people say that about themselves. And you cannot hate yourself into a body that you love. But if you experience unwanted and unprecedented weight gain due to hormonal imbalance or health issues, and you want to try to lose that weight, you can still pursue that while maintaining neutrality with your body, because you know that you appreciate yourself regardless. You just know that this is not the skin you want to stay in.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly right. And I really appreciate that for sure. Thank you so much for being here and talking with me. I'll put links in the description below to Elena's website, Instagram, a link for you to sign up for her coaching, fill out a form if you're interested in that, as well as just all of Elena's recommendations too, and any details. Leave in the comments below any questions you have for Elena, and we can do a whole other video as well answering those. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. And thank you so much for helping me with my whole entire journey as well. You know how much it's meant.
I know. It's been so much fun. You've been doing awesome.
Thank you so much. Okay. Well, I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Okay.
We'll coordinate another, like a part 2, maybe. you know, in the next week or two.
Absolutely.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.